This is why we call our home the Blue Planet.
The Rwenzori Mountains and Mount Kenya will lose their glaciers by 2030.
And what are some of the effects associated with sea level rise?
Sanitation is a problem for 2.4 billion people.
Hey, Rainbow. Welcome back to the Rainbow Climate Change Podcast, hosted by your environment prefects for this year, Philippe and
Malikia. Today we'll talk about one of the most important things on our planet and how climate change is affecting it.
The title and thumbnail probably gave it away, but that thing is water. We need water to do everything from cooking to cleaning and generating electricity. However, climate change makes those things harder by decreasing our water supplies.
How, for instance?
One of the major culprits is changing rain patterns. Rainfall is expected to increase by 5 to 20% during the December to February period each year. This increase is probably going to be due to a few very intense rainstorms leading to an excess of water, which could make water management difficult. We talked about how climate change leads to changing weather patterns overall last week. So if you're on YouTube, feel free to click the card that's showing right now and watch episode 2 to learn more.
So is it all doom and gloom?
Not completely. Some parts of the region are very dry and could do with the extra water. Researchers predict that intense rainfall over dry regions could lead to groundwater sources being refilled.
What exactly is groundwater?
The name is actually a lot simpler than it might sound. Groundwater is quite literally water that is in the ground. Below the surface of the earth, there is soil and rock. Usually when you see soil, it looks like a flat or almost flat, solid surface. However, soil likes to clump together, and there are actually tiny gaps between each clump of soil, and water can seep into these gaps, stay there, and form groundwater.
And what about rocks?
Rocks in the Earth's surface also have holes and cracks in them, much like the rocks and stones you see on the surface. So water can enter and stay in those holes and cracks as groundwater.
So if all this water is underground, why is it important?
Alright, so let me paint a picture for you. 71% of the Earth's surface is covered in water. This is why we call our home the Blue Planet. However, only 3% of the water on Earth is fresh water. The rest is salt water, which is much more difficult and expensive to prepare for human consumption. But even though 3% of Earth's water is fresh water, only 1% is actually liquid fresh water. How much of this 1% do you think is in like rivers and lakes, Malikia?
I don't know, maybe 2%?
Really close. It's 3%. And even though you might not see it, groundwater accounts for nearly all of the liquid fresh water we have on our planet, 97%. So it's a good thing that climate change refills our groundwater. However, as we said earlier, it makes it difficult for us to manage the extra water.
It's easy to think that there is a lot of water on Earth, but we can only use a very small amount. So it's important to use it wisely and not waste it.
100%.
Now that you've brought up percentages again, you mentioned that only 1% of Earth's water is liquid fresh water. Where's the other fresh water on Earth?
The rest of the world's fresh water is solid water in ice, snow, and glaciers. A glacier is just a really, really big, heavy block of ice. You can find them in mountains such as the Rwenzori Mountains, Mount Kilimanjaro, and Mount Kenya. This ice melt turns into fresh water, which we can call meltwater, and it's very useful. At the base of Mount Kilimanjaro, for example, communities use this meltwater for drinking, farming, and hydropower.
And how is climate change affecting East Africa's glaciers?
Global warming is increasing temperatures, so that leads to glaciers melting faster than they can be replenished. As a result, the glacier cover in the Rwenzori Mountains decreased by about 50% between 1987 and 2003. In other mountains of East Africa, Mount Kilimanjaro lost about 65% of its glaciers during the same period, and Mount Kenya lost 44% of its glaciers between 2004 and 2016.
This trend is expected to continue, with some estimates that the Rwenzori Mountains and Mount Kenya will lose their glaciers by 2030, while Mount Kilimanjaro has a bit more time until 2040. Not only will this lead to fewer water resources, but fewer tourists might end up coming to our mountains.
The last major way climate change affects our water is by raising sea levels. As sea levels rise, salt water might enter and contaminate our precious freshwater groundwater sources. That was a mouthful to say. The exact amount of sea level rise depends on the amount of global warming. if temperatures reach 4 degrees above pre-industrial levels by 2100, sea levels could rise by a whole meter compared to where they were at the start of the century. But if we can limit global warming to 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, then sea levels may instead rise by 40 centimeters above what they were at the start of the century. How come sea levels rise, Malikia?
Well, this is because warmer temperature causes water to expand by a process known as thermal expansion, and so water levels rise. Also, the warmer temperatures lead to melting of glaciers and ice caps, which increases the volume of water in oceans. But sea level rise is also affected by oceanogenic factors.
What are those factors?
Well, they're simply the physical and chemical properties of the ocean, including its temperature, density, and motion.
So, what are some more statistics associated with sea level rise?
Well, I think the most important thing to note is that in 2023, global average sea level set a new record of 101.4 millimeters above 1933 levels. This is because, as you may know from our last episode, 2023 had the highest temperatures recorded. If you wish to know more about temperatures in 2023, please check out our last episode. Anyway, moving on, in many locations, the rate of local sea level rise is greater than the global average. This is because of processes like erosion, oil, and groundwater pumping. Also, high tidal flooding is currently 300% to more than 900% more frequent than it was 50 years ago. That's such an increase for a short period of time. Additionally, high background water level means that deadly and destructive storm surges, such as those associated with Hurricane Katrina, Storm Sandy, and Hurricane Michael, push further inland than they once did, leading to damaged buildings and contaminated freshwater aquifers.
And what are some of the effects associated with sea level rise?
Well, the impact of sea level rise include permanent flooding, also known as inundation of low-lying areas, an increased frequency, extent and depth of tidal inundation. Sea level rise will also cause most sandy beaches to recede, so there will be beaches moving further inland. But that's not all. Sea level rise is projected to damage infrastructure, industries, and coastal ecosystems like the coral reef, estuary, etc. Also, sea level rise is very likely to continue even if greenhouse gas emissions are reduced, perhaps due to the fact that ocean water can move vertically and so heat at depth. So it takes the ocean many decades to adjust to warming at the surface and achieve a new equilibrium. It is projected that high sea level events will occur more frequently in the future, and that will cause high risk of flooding and erosion. Also, there may be some ecological changes due to sea level rise.
What are ecological changes?
Well, these are changes to Earth's climate driven by increased human emissions of greenhouse gases, leading to widespread effects on the environment, for example, changes in plant and animal geographic ranges, and plants blooming faster. Additionally, sea level rise can affect infrastructure like roads. It can also worsen coastal erosion and saline intrusion into coastal aquifers, threatening drinking water supplies.
Saline intrusion. What's that?
Well, aquifers is a body of permeable rock which can contain or transmit groundwater. So if this seawater intrudes on the groundwater, it will lead to the water being contaminated. Saline intrusion, on the other hand, is a term used to mean impregnated with salt.
I see. But what are other effects of climate change on water?
Well, there is a decrease in water available for agriculture because increased temperatures lead to evaporation, depletion of water sources, and communities vulnerable to water scarcity. However, some may argue that irrigating may be able to solve this problem. But irrigation is known to consume a significant portion of the world's freshwater resources, which could make it counterproductive. Also, decrease in water available could lead to less water consumption. As a result, inadequate sanitation is a problem for 2.4 billion people as they are exposed to diseases such as cholera and typhoid and other waterborne illnesses. In fact, 2 million people, mostly children, die each year from diarrhea diseases alone.
Why does less water availability lead to such illnesses?
It's due to contaminated water and poor sanitation.
So on that note, we're going to move into our weekly quiz. Just a small way to tease your brain on what we've talked about today. So feel free to pause after each question, think about the answer, and listen to the next question after that. So the first question is, how much of Earth's water is liquid freshwater? How much of Earth's water is liquid freshwater? The second question, why are glaciers important? Why are glaciers important?
The third question, what causes sea level rise? What causes sea level rise? What are ecological factors? What are ecological factors?
So, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Rainbow Climate Change Podcast. Hopefully, it's opened your eyes to some of the effects that climate change has on water, one of the most precious resources we have on our home planet. If you would like to send us some questions or just tell us anything you find interesting, feel free to just send us an email or comment it down below. And we'll also use this time to remind you of our banner competition, which will end tomorrow. So if you have any banners you'd like to submit for our YouTube channel, remember it has to be 2560 pixels wide and 1440 pixels tall. Thanks and bye.
Bye bye.